Hi, this is Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Welcome to the weekly Top 3, the top 3 things on our mind here at Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets for the week of December 1st, 2025. The weekly Top 3 is a regular segment on The Michael Dukes Show. The show broadcasts on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as well as via streaming audio from the show's website, weekdays from 6 to 8 a.m. I join Michael weekly in the first hour of Tuesday's show from 6:10 to 7 a.m. for a discussion between the two of us about our 3 issues. We post the podcast of our discussion following the show on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, also on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets website, as well as the project's page on national blog site, medium.com. You can find past episodes of the weekly Top 3 also at the same locations. Keep in mind that in addition to these podcasts, during the week, you can also follow and participate in the discussion with us of these and other issues affecting Alaska's fiscal and economic condition by following us on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook page and through our posts on Twitter. This week, our top 3 issues are these. First, we discuss the uncertainty regarding oil price, and with that, oil revenues the legislature will face this coming session. Second, we explain why we have asked whether Lieutenant Governor Dahlstrom is duplicitous or just dumb when it comes to the permanent fund. And third, we explain while we like Ralph Samuels, we believe that he is a horrible pick for the board of the Permanent Fund Corporation. And now, let's join Michael.
Get to it. It's not really that bad. There's some interesting stuff that Brad's digging into. First of all, there's going to be charts and homework on this first one, which is going to be tough for me this early in the morning. But Brad's going to talk about the challenge facing the fall forecasts for this year. Brad, what do we got here? Give me the rundown.
Well, by December 15th, the governor is supposed to provide his budget, and along with the budget is supposed to be the fall revenue forecast from the Department of Revenue. And usually, I have a pretty good feel for both, and I guess I do also for this year. Although there's been some rumors the governor's going to make a new revenue proposal. But usually I have a good feel for what the revenue forecast is going to look like. And this year, if they follow the rules they've followed, I know what it's going to look like. But the question is it going to be realistic? If you'll throw this chart up, Michael, I'll try to talk through it because it's important.
And for those of you who are at home, this chart is complex. I feel like I need a slide rule for this chart, but you can view it over on the website or over on the Facebook page at facebook.com/MichaelDukesShow/live, and you can look at the chart and follow along. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, it's the chart I use for my 8:30 a.m. chart every day, 6 days a week. I don't publish it on Sunday, but it's the chart that I use that I publish at 8:30 every day. And it's got a lot of things going on. I'm trying to do a lot of things with it. But the thing that's really interesting as we're coming up on the fall revenue forecast is what this says about the FY26, which we're in currently, the FY26 revenue forecast for oil, and what it says about the FY27 revenue forecast for oil. The predictions or the fall revenue, the spring revenue forecast that the Department of Revenue issued last spring projected $68 a barrel for oil. By the time we got to the governor's, by the time the appropriations bill passed and it got to the governor, oil prices had taken a dive, and so there was a revised revenue forecast that came out from the Department of Revenue in support of the governor's vetoes that projected $64 a barrel oil. So it was down this is for FY26. It was down $4 from the spring revenue forecast down to the revised spring revenue forecast that the the Commissioner of Revenue at the time issued. And it looks like If you look at the futures market, it looks like that $64, $68 we've blown through, but the $64 that was the revised revenue forecast on which the governor premised his vetoes looks like it's going to be a good number. If you look at the futures market right now, over the remainder of the fiscal year, the average for the fiscal year is about $65. So that $64 looks fairly reasonable. Here's the challenge. The Energy Information Administration, the Federal Energy Information Administration, issues what it calls its short-term energy outlook. We've talked about this on the show before. And the short-term energy outlook is probably the best of the price projections that you get out there from independent sources, from non-market sources, if you will. You'll get the investment banks that'll come out with, Bank of America will come out with one, Chase will come out with one, others will come out with various projections. But the EIA has a pretty good computer program factoring in supply and demand, and is pretty good at projecting price. They're projecting, it's the dotted red line or the dashed red line in the middle of this chart. They're projecting a big drop in oil prices over the first half of next calendar year, the last half of fiscal year 26. And that projected drop would take the average price for FY26 down to $60 a barrel. Again, in perspective, DOR's spring forecast was 68. The revised revenue forecast that came out in support of the governor's vetoes was 64. And if you look at EIA, it takes it down to $60 a barrel over the year. Some think that's too pessimistic. But the thing about EIA is they've been showing this trend down for a while now. We talked about it in October, maybe. They've been showing this trend down for a while now, and the market has sort of started bending toward what EIA's projections have been. The futures market is still elevated from that. The futures market is still showing 65 a year for FY 2026. So the futures market hasn't bent all the way down to EIA, but there's a lot of explanation behind EIA's projection that is pretty solid in terms of the muted demand that we have, oil demand in the world, global oil demand, and the increased production that's coming out of OPEC's announcements, OPEC Plus announcements, plus the additional findings around the world, or the additional projects that are coming on stream around the world. So it'll be interesting to see what Department of Revenue will likely do what it always has done, which is take the 10 days, the futures market 10 days in advance of the date they publish the projection, and base the price on that. And so we'll likely see out of Department of Revenue somewhere in the $64 to $65 range, which is what the futures market tells you now. But we may be facing a much steeper price decline in the first half of next year. That over the course of the legislative session price is going to deteriorate, and it's going to make for a really interesting legislative session, because the discussion is going to start with the fall revenue forecast, but you may see the market trending away from that. Right. The even bigger issue is FY27, the budget that the legislature will be putting together this coming spring for the subsequent fiscal year, FY27. And Department of Revenue in the spring revenue forecast projected $67 for FY27. The futures market currently is telling you $63 for FY27. The EIA forecast for FY27 right now is $56, $11 less than was in the spring revenue forecast, and $7 less than is in the futures market would tell you right now. So if DOR makes a projection for FY27 based upon the 10 days that we're going to see in advance of the projection coming out, if they're going to make that, then we're going to see a projection in the range of $63, which is down significantly, materially, from the $67 in the spring forecast.
Can you break it out for us just a little bit? I mean, the differences here, I think some people are like, okay, 67, 63, 56. When we're talking about an $11 difference, what kind of revenue hit are we talking about for the state?
So we're talking about probably $35 a barrel in terms of the difference per dollar. It gets a little bit shallower the deeper you go because the minimum floor kicks in. But we're probably talking $35 a barrel. So with a $10 difference, which is what we're talking about for FY20, more than a $10 difference for FY27, but with a $10 difference, we'd be talking about a $350 million difference in revenues between what was projected in the spring revenue forecast versus for FY27 spring revenue forecast versus what EIA is telling us to look for in FY27 now. So from 67 to 63, what is that? That's $140 million between what the spring revenue forecast projected and what the futures market tells you now between 67 and 63. When you go down to 56, we're going down another what? $7. So we're going down another $250 million maybe between those two projections. Those are big numbers when you're looking at the revenue side. I mean, we're only getting $2 billion or plus or minus out of oil now. And if you're talking about dropping that $250 million, you're talking, that's a fairly big drop. That's
right.
So these are fairly big, and the drop on the FY25 from 68 down to 65. So 68's what the Department of Revenue said in the spring forecast for FY25, down to 60. So that's $8. That's what, 300 or some odd million plus or minus for the drop in what FY25 may or FY26 may show between what was in the spring revenue forecast. And
so again, a potential for what we're already looking at, add another $200 to $300 million in losses if this holds true.
Yeah. So I wouldn't want to be a legislator for a lot of reasons, but there's going to be a very difficult situation when they come back to Juneau in January, because their fall revenue forecast will likely have told them, based upon the traditional futures market base, will likely have told them that they're going to be down, but not down hugely from where they thought they were going to be on FY26, and they're going to be down a lot, but not down massively from where they thought they were going to be on FY27. But if the EIA's projections hold, if come true, then in the course of the session, they're going to find the oil market the bottom just dropping away from them. Right. When you have people up there talking about, oh, we need more money for education and we need more money for this, we need more, the revenue side is going to be dropping away from them. So it's going to be it's going to be a very challenging legislature as they hit the ground. We will probably know by February or March whether EIA's forecasts are coming true, whether the drop that EIA has forecast is coming true. But it's going to be like February or March before we know that. So it's just going to be a very challenging time for the legislature to deal with this.
All right. Well, we'll have to see what this looks like, especially if you look at this chart and you see the IAE line drop in January, February, and March, of course, right at the beginning of the session. If oil does bottom out towards the low 50s in that point, the panic could set in. I mean, it could be some really interesting things. All right. Well, we'll keep a look for this. And of course, we're looking for the governor's budget on the 15th to see what they are projecting and what they're going to build the budget on and everything else. And we'll see what that looks like there as well. Jim just said, there's a new gas line. Oh, not even talking about that this week, but no, Jim, there's not a new budget. There's not a new gas line coming. In fact, this is kind of like the old gas line argument at this point. We're not even going to really talk about that this week, but especially after that meeting, Brad, with the fiscal certainty component of it in front of the legislature. You could just see that the wheels are starting to come off the bus on this deal.
It the whole thing was, oh, we're gonna go out and get these market commitments. We're gonna build the line. It's a private enterprise now. Glenfarne's got a hold of it. We don't need state support. Don't worry about it. We got it under control. We're gonna go out and get private financing. And I could just, I've been around this a long time, and I could just see they're trying to build up expectations before they walk into the legislature and say, oh, and by the way, we need these 20 things from you, these 20 supports and 20, commitments and 20 financial concessions in order to make this thing work. I knew this was coming. And you could just see it, but that they tried this whole build up about it's a private venture and we're going to get private financing. And we're going to, enter into all these market it just, and here it is. Sure enough, it's coming in. I will say, for those who have been around this long, it is the contract they're talking about, the commitments they're talking about are essentially the same commitments that Governor Murkowski proposed in 2006 in connection with the producer line, in connection with the line that was then proposed by Conoco, BP, and Exxon, that was a line to the lower 48 at the time. And it's the same package of things that Glenfarne's talking about as was in the package that Governor Murkowski proposed to the legislature in 2006. And that just blew up. By the end of 2000, you remember 2006 was a pretty bad year for Murkowski. The legislature sort of rebelled on him. He lost the primary to Palin. And then, in the election of 2006, Palin beat Tony Knowles, and Murkowski was out by the end of 2006. So it's not, I remember that time clearly. And the legislature just could not deal with all of the various pieces that it was being asked to provide assurance on and support on and supplement on. It included the the property tax, fix at the time. And
right.
And so I'm just sitting here seeing this play out again. And the legislature, talk about deer in the headlights.
That was back when we had $15 billion in the bank, right? That was back in the day we had money.
Yep.
And they still were like, whoa.
Yep. And so and if this plays out the same way it did with Murkowski, if that whole package hits the legislature and they do the same thing the 2006 legislature did, which was, we're not going to approve all this. If they do that, you can see, it'll be interesting to see what goes on in the governor's race during the session as that package hits the legislature. Are gubernatorial candidates going to endorse that sort of thing? If so, they may find the same erosion in support that Murkowski had in 2006. And I know there was a lot of other things going on with Murkowski, but that was a bad session from the standpoint of the legislature trying to comprehend all that it was being asked to do.
No, I could hear the sphincter slamming shut from here when they had that meeting with Glenfarne, and they're like, "Oh, we need all that." You could just hear the oxygen leave the room at that point. But and I think a lot of people have started to realize that is, the kind of the beginning of the end of that discussion on the gas line. Let's continue on. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three continues. We just had a conversation about the gas line during the break. Oh man, that's gonna be fugly. That's gonna be really, really nasty. All right, but now we're on to number two of the weekly top three, where Brad asked the question: is Lieutenant Governor Dahlstrom duplicitous or just dumb? It's just dumb. It's Brad. Okay, Brad. Hit me with it here. What are we talking about?
So Lieutenant Governor Dahlstrom, candidate for governor Nancy Dahlstrom, wrote an op-ed in the ADN entitled "An Endowment Can Guarantee a Reliable PFD for Generations," and it's just dumb. It's just, it is. The headline says, "A reliable PFD for generations." The body of it says, if we do all these things, then we're going to have a reliable PFD. It starts out by attacking the $1,000 PFD. Fast forward to 2025, after the smallest PFD in decades, just $1,000. Families are hurting and furious. And then she goes on and she has this long about how we're going to fix the permanent fund, turn it into an endowment, and that's going to fix the PFD. The endowment approach that is in legislation before both bodies, before the Senate and the House, and that Dahlstrom talks about in this article, does nothing with respect to the PFD. It doesn't guarantee any level of PFD. Indeed, it doesn't guarantee a PFD at all. All it does is change the way in which the structure of the permanent fund is set up. We currently have the two account structure. We've talked a lot about it on the show. The proposal is to merge the two together. That does nothing with respect to the PFD. There's no provision in what's been proposed in the legislatures in either body. There's no provision in what Dahlstrom talks about here that guarantees any sort of PFD. All it does is tighten the permanent fund into one account, and the provisions that are before the bodies would open a back door into it. Dahlstrom at least sort of checks that, but there's nothing in there that provides a guaranteed PFD of any amount. It doesn't say you'll get $1,000. It doesn't say you'll get $500. It doesn't say you'll get $2,000. It is silent. And it leaves the legislature with the continued ability, as it's done since 2017, leaves the legislature with the continued ability to continue to cut the PFD, use PFD cuts to fund government, to divert that money, withhold PFDs, and divert that money over to government. So when she says, it's going to fix the PFD and it's going to ensure that, let's see, this isn't about politics or Juno games. It's about giving families certainty, a dividend you can count on every single year. No more $1,000 surprises, no more last minute fights. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do any of that. It doesn't fix that problem at all. It doesn't address that problem. And so here, the question I have, is she being duplicitous, intentionally misleading by a headline that says an endowment can guarantee a reliable PFD for generations, a body of the article that says, we're not going to have many more $1,000 PFDs. That was a horrible thing to do, to cut the PFD down to 1,000. We're not going to do that anymore. When her proposal doesn't affect that at all. Is she being duplicitous, intentionally misleading Alaskans with this article by saying, hey, I'm going to fix your PFD by doing nothing, by making these changes over to the permanent fund, the permanent fund? Is she being intentionally misleading, or is she just dumb?
Right.
That she doesn't understand what she's saying. There are other things in this commentary or in this op-ed by her that I find sort of falling into the same category. She talks about the fact that the merger of the two will, it enables the Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation to invest aggressively for maximum growth instead of being forced to hold cash just in case the legislature demands it. A fully protected endowment earning higher returns, compounds faster. Independent modeling shows this approach delivers more. There's nothing. I went back and looked at the first quarter financials for the Permanent Fund Corporation. What they're holding in cash is $2.6 billion, 3% of the overall amount is what they're holding in cash. They ought to hold that in cash anyway. And so they're not holding a ton of cash away from and not investing a ton of cash, waiting on depending upon what the legislature is going to do. They've gone ahead, relied on the statute as they should. They've gone ahead and invested a heavy amount, as they should, for maximum return. They're not investing it the right way, but they've gone ahead and invested a heavy amount, and they're holding a little minimum in cash. And that's exactly what they ought to do. It's exactly what they would do. It's exactly what they would do under the new model as well. There's not this hidden. The Permanent Fund Corporation is using this argument as an excuse for how bad their investment returns have been. Oh, we got to hold all this cash because we don't know if the legislature is going to call for more than 5%. They're going to take more out of the earnings reserve than the 5% provided by, so we got to hold all this cash. And that's why our returns have been so bad. That's not right. Their returns have been bad because they've invested badly. But it's not been because they've been holding cash, because when you look at the first quarter results, they're only holding 3% of the balance in cash. So Dahlstrom is off. Dahlstrom is it looks like she's bought the permanent fund corporation's argument hook, line, and sinker. And talk about a sinker. I mean, she's sinking with it. She doesn't understand. She either doesn't understand what she's saying, or she's intentionally misleading people by what she's saying.
Right, because again, people don't understand the disconnect in this argument between combining the permanent fund and the payout of the PFD. Because as of this point, the payout of the PFD is decided by the legislature. They've ignored the statute. There's nothing in this combining of the funds that would force the legislature to then follow the statute or make any other changes. If it gives them more money, they will just spend more money, because there's no regulator, there's no mechanism by which you can hold them accountable to change that. And if she did this because she, one, just doesn't understand, or if she's being duplicitous, either one disqualifies her as a legitimate gubernatorial candidate.
Absolutely. There's no reason to spend any time thinking about Nancy Dahlstrom after this. I mean, if this is the kind of financial thinking that we've got in a candidate, I mean, Tom Begich is better than this. There are a lot of candidates that are better than this. There are a lot of candidates that at least understand. It's going to be interesting, Michael. This may be a litmus test on gubernatorial candidates. It may be a good question to put to gubernatorial candidates. What is your position on merging the two account permanent fund corporation system or permanent fund system into a one account system? And if they say, well, I'm for the merger, then ask them why. And if they spew this sort of stuff, then we can take them off the list too. We may get to who our candidate is by elimination of what the candidates are saying about this proposal, because it demonstrates they have no understanding of how A, the permanent fund works, B, how the permanent fund dividend works, or C, the reality of how the permanent fund corporation right now is investing money and the amount that they're holding in cash right now. So it's a disqualifier for her for sure. And if other candidates take this position about supporting the merger on these grounds, or frankly any other grounds, if other candidates take this position, it's a disqualifier for them as well.
It's disappointing, because I'm seeing more and more of this talk about the combining of the funds and some of the different people that I've run into. But when you pick at that position, then they start going, what? See, they're buying the top level gloss of this story, and because not many people really understand how the permanent fund works, or how the dividend works, or how any of those things are tied together. So on the surface, they're buying the surface argument of, combining the funds will save us all, not realizing that it opens up the back door of the corpus, and that, of course, there's no connection between the payout of the PFD and the combining of the funds and everything else. And they don't even understand the investment strategy. Nobody is really talking about that. And that is, to me, the most dangerous thing, because if they're able to sell the public on this, then they can get access to that. And that's what's going to lead to some real problems.
All this proposal is a proposal to put off taxes, a proposal to take money out of the permanent fund. I mean, Dahlstrom does say, I'll give her this. She says at one point, limit the draws to the lesser of 5% or actual realized returns. This will eliminate the fear some have of tapping into and draining the corpus itself. Well, there's this whole question about what the hell how they're going to calculate actual returns, because you can rig that game in order to continue to draw more out, take more out when it's more than what's coming in. But all this proposal is a way of ensuring that there's continued cash flow into government spending. There's no guarantee it goes to the PFD. A continued cash flow into government spending, and the proposal that's in both bodies right now lets them have the back door into the permanent fund corpus to keep that flow going to support spending. And all that really is an effort by non-residents, the top 20%, and the oil companies, to avoid taxes, to avoid a discussion of taxes by increasing the amount of money and stabilizing the amount of money that's coming out of the permanent fund corpus. So, I mean, that's the real genesis behind the proposal, and whatever else it does. I mean, you can argue about whether that's a good thing or bad thing, but whatever else it does, it sure as hell doesn't guarantee a PFD, and it sure as hell isn't a solution to the PFD issue. And that sure as hell is where Dahlstrom goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think about it like this. I think about the combining of the permanent funds is their attempt to build more road to kick the can down. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's all it does. Is it it builds more road to kick the can down a few more years until they've drained down the corpus of the fund to the point to where the returns they don't equal the expenditures, and then we're in then it's a real brown spot, if you know what I mean. Frank says, which candidate has the correct plan then? Well, I don't know if anybody's got the correct plan yet, but you will know that the candidate is not correct if they're calling for a combining of the permanent fund. That's an immediate red flag, should be an immediate red flag to you as well.
Absolutely. Have you asked, I've listened to some of the interviews you've had with some of the gubernatorial candidates. Have you asked them about this issue as you've gone along?
Yeah, I've asked it as kind of as a sidebar topic. Bernadette is the one that I've had the most conversation with, and I've actually had it on the air with her about what you've talked about the returns of the fund and changing out the board members and things like that. And she's the one that's actually, I think she's the only one that's actually referenced some of the things that you've talked about in that. But no, I have never talked to Nancy Dahlstrom. I tried to get her on the program last go around when she was running for Congress, and they just never, didn't want to be bothered to come on, apparently, is the thing. But this is the problem. And I think Bradley maybe has knocked onto something here. He says the problem is we're getting less and less qualified candidates. But is that because those who are qualified are smart to not get involved in government? Too many hands able to control whose hand gets in the cooking jar and how to spread the cookies wisely. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe the smart ones are like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I mean, why? This is my question, and this is really my question for a lot of the gubernatorial. Why would you want to be governor now? I mean, is it to save us? Because I surely wouldn't want to step into that brown mess, is what's going on right now, because you're going to be one person fighting against 60 yahoos. All they want to do is spend money, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get the right candidate to step up, but this is, I mean, all this, what we've got so far, if you sort of look around with some of the candidates, is you've got special interest sponsors. Dahlstrom clearly has allied herself with the top 20% of the oil companies and non-resident industries with this proposal. But you got Tom Begich, who's really, appealing to the K through 12, to the education community. And you've got other candidates, Click wants infrastructure, he wants construction, construction spending, capital spending. You've got other candidates who are sort of aligning themselves with special interest. And that's frankly one of the problems with ranked choice voting. I mean, to get into the top five or four, whatever we use.
Four, yeah.
To get into the top four, you've got to come out of the primary with enough numbers to be one of the top four. And the way people are looking at that, it's I've got to gather a base of about 10 to 15% of the voting population behind me. If I get that, I'll get into the top four, and I'll be able to run my campaign. So you've got people who are really appealing. I mean, what ranked choice voting is doing is really forcing people to appeal to very, very narrow segments. And that's, I don't know if Dahlstrom's just dumb or if she's being duplicitous about this in her discussions about the PFD, but whichever it is, she's really trying to appeal to a fairly narrow slice of people who want to see the permanent fund tapped.
And the more this argument goes mainstream, the more uncomfortable I get about it, this combining of the funds argument. And the more that it gets thrown around, the more I'm just like, I mean, I don't know why people can't see what this is. And tying it to the permanent fund dividend on top of that is the biggest false flag that I've seen. It's a red herring by, like you said, because there is no connection at all. You could change how the fund works 100 different ways, and none of it would matter as to how the PFD is paid out, because that is 100% decided by the legislature at this point.
If they tied, if the proposal that comes out of the Senate or if the proposal that's in the legislature is to put in a provision in that constitutional amendment that guarantees the PFD at a certain amount, and we can evaluate what the amount is if they do that. If that's the proposal that comes out, that may be something worth talking about. But right now, it's not that. It is much more tap the permanent fund, or rationalize how we're going to get more money out of the permanent fund by this proposal, and without addressing the PFD issue at all. And if that's all this proposal is, then it's a complete non-starter. If Dahlstrom would have said, if one of her points would have been, and we need to include a guarantee for a permanent fund dividend of a certain amount, we need to adopt 50-50. We need to adopt 33-67.
Or
we need
constitutionalize some kind of formula or something. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
if she had included that, entirely different discussion, but she didn't. There's no mention of actually doing that. It's just, if we do all these other things, none of which relate to the PFD, if we do all these other things, we'll get a bigger PFD. No, you won't. There's no tie between those two.
Yeah.
So if some candidate wants to endorse this proposal, but endorse it conditioned on the adoption of a guaranteed PFD, then maybe we can talk about it. But that's not what's going on here.
No. And Kim says, then you've got Click Bishop blocking his constituents who question anything about the way the PFD is appropriated. I mean, yeah, these candidates for governor are kind of self-selecting themselves, I think, at this point for discard at this point. All right, Brad Keithley, the weekly top three continues. We're going to jump back into it here. Number 3 of the weekly top three starts out with, Ralph Samuels is a nice guy, but Brad, Ralph Samuels is a nice guy, but is he PFC material?
Look, I like Ralph Samuels. I've spent time with Ralph Samuels. I like him as a person. I've supported him in the Republican primary in 2010 when he ran against Sean Parnell in the primary. He was he was a very alert and very intelligent legislator when he was in the House of Representatives. Before that, he's been a good ambassador for Alaska over the last since he lost the race for governor, in various positions of supporting trade associations, heading trade associations, and supporting various activities in that regard. Nice person, but he's not what we need on the Permanent Fund Corporation. Dunleavy's appointment of him to the Permanent Fund Corporation, I think, is a big wasted opportunity on the part of the administration. Look, the Permanent Fund Corporation ought to be all about investment professionals and people who understand the investment industry and understand how to make investments and understand how to listen through the bullshit when investment advisors are telling you ought to go with their product as opposed to some other product. And it's somebody who understands that we ought not to be paying $1 billion a year in terms of investment advisory fees like we are now, and is able to sort of parse through how we get rid of that, and somebody who's able to think about alternative investment strategies that, for example, the Buffett approach, the 90-10 approach that we've talked about on the show before. It ought to be somebody who's conversant. We ought to have people on the Permanent Fund Board who are conversant with those sorts of investment issues, and knowledgeable about those investment issues, because that's what the Permanent Fund Board, the Permanent Fund Corporation, is supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be maximizing our return through investments. Ralph and Jason and others would be great appointments to ADA, which is how you invest money appropriated by the legislature to them, invest money into the community to build business. They would be great appointments to ADA. They are horrible appointments to the Permanent Fund Corporation. We've talked about this on the show before, but I want to go back to it for a second. The University of Texas or Texas has a combined Texas and Texas A&M combined investment company called UTIMCO, the University of Texas A&M Investment Management Company. And UTIMCO is probably the most comparable sovereign wealth fund out there to what we have. I mean, they take resource revenues earned by the universities through their ownership of lands in Texas, and then invest them, and they're investing them for maximizing the return. Here's how UTIMCO is described. UTIMCO is a not-for-profit corporation modeled after investment management companies organized by Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, and Duke universities to invest their respective assets. It was the first investment corporation formed by a public university system and is governed by a nine-member board. This is the membership. A 9-member board consisting of at least 3 members of the UT System Board of Regents, 4 members appointed by the UT System Board of Regents, 3 of which, so we got a 9-member board, 3 of which that are appointed by UT, University of Texas, must have a substantial background and expertise in investments, and 2 members appointed by the Texas A&M System Board of Regents, 1 of which must have a substantial background and expertise in investments. So 3 from the UT appointees and 1 from the A&M appointees must have a substantial background and expertise in investments. That's 4 of the 9 of the UTIMCO board that then must have to have that sort of background. In Alaska, with the Permanent Fund Corporation, we have 0. We have 0. The statutory requirement for Alaska is the 4 public members of the board must have recognized competence and wide experience in finance investments or other business management related fields. And what Dunleavy's done in his appointments of the public members of the board has been to rely on that business management related field, business management experience, to appoint members of the board. We have Jason Bruni, who's the chair, who was the commissioner of Department of Environmental Quality in the early stages of the Dunleavy administration, but before that was really a trade association chair. Ethan Schutt, who's the chair of Doyon. Ryan Anderson, I think it's Doyon. Oh, Ethan. No, it's his brother that's the chair of Doyon. Ethan is vice president general counsel for Bristol Bay. Ryan Anderson, who's the commissioner of transportation. John Binkley. Binkley may come the closest, but Binkley's background really is in small business and in running a trade association, the Alaska one of the Alaska trade associations. Janelle Earls, who's the current commissioner of revenue, and Ralph Samuels. None of those would fit on the UTIMCO board. None of those would meet the criteria of having a substantial background and expertise in investments. So Ralph's a nice guy. Jason's a nice guy. They'd be great over on the ADA board. They'd be great in addressing how you spend money or how you invest money that the legislature appropriates you to build Alaska businesses. They'd be great at that. They are horrible picks for a board that's supposed to be focused on investing Alaska's nest egg to provide the maximum return. And it's just, I mean, I don't know why Dunleavy did it. I don't know what's in his mind. Maybe this is speculation, but maybe he wants Ralph on there, another good lobbyist, because Ralph's a good lobbyist, another good lobbyist on there to help push the Permanent Fund Corporation's proposal to merge the 2 funds together. Maybe that's why he's got Ralph on there, but it's not because Ralph has any great expertise in making investments or in how the investment industry operates. And I think it, just like when he put Johnny Binkley on the board, just like when he put Jason on the board, Dunleavy's just wasting opportunities to get people on the board that understand the investment industry, that can ask the sharp questions that need to be asked to better redefine the investment strategy we're pursuing, that can ask the questions that need to be asked to substantially reduce the outside payments, the $1 billion a year we're making in outside payments to investment advisors. It's just another wasted opportunity in getting somebody on the board that would be capable of doing that. We would be much better off. The next governor would be much better off following the UTIMCO standard of persons who have a substantial background and expertise in investments would be much better off in doing that than appointing people that frankly ought to be on the ADA board as opposed to on the Permanent Fund Corporation board.
Right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. You can find him at ak4sb.com. I would love to see a governor go in there and just kind of clean house, just kind of clean house. And again, put investment professionals on the board with the question of, hey, the Vanguard S&P is doing this. We're doing this. How do we get closer to that and reduce our $800 million to $1 billion a year in fees on top of that? That should be the first thing a governor does. 90 seconds here, Red.
No, exactly right. Exactly right, Michael. And there are people out there that can do that. I mean, we've got investment advisors in this state. We've got bankers. That probably the best permanent fund board member we've had in the recent past was Bill Moran out of Ketchikan, who ran a bank down there, and he asked those hard questions and he focused on those things. I mean, we've got bankers out there that could do that. We got investment advisors that could do that. And we're just, we're appointing, these people who have, good political resumes and have an understanding of the Alaska industry. And so would be great appointments to ADA, but, we're not doing that. We're putting them over on the Permanent Fund Corporation.
It's become more political than anything else, right? I mean, this has become a political tool rather than an actual financial tool.
Yep.
And that's part of the problem. And that's led to this whole discussion about combining the funds, because those actions have led to a lessening of the value and the ability for it to generate revenue. And instead of fixing it, they're going to accelerate that revenue consumption to the point of where it just doesn't matter anymore. This is what gets me. They politicize the whole board, which has led to the reduction in the returns, which has led to a lessening of the amount of revenues, and an attempt to recapture those revenues. Instead of reversing that course, they've decided to combine the funds to eat into the seed corn and basically just accelerate the demise of the fund. That's the answer. Instead of fixing it and putting people on there who care about the returns, or just pinning it to the S&P or doing whatever they need to do, they do this. And that's just think about how long they've been paying those $1 billion per year of investment fees. And if that money had instead gone directly back into the fund, what would that have done over the last 10 or 12 or 15 years?
Yeah. And Michael, it's not like there aren't people out there that could do this. I mean, they aren't flashy. They don't have the political resumes or the public profile of a Ralph Samuels, but you don't want people like that on the board. You want the green eye shade people. You want the Bill Morans. You want the people who, who've spent their life in the investment industry, understand the BS. I know we're not on the air now, so I could say it, but understand the BS that is being spewed by a lot of these investment advisors, and can cut to the chase and say, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? We don't need to be doing this. We don't need to be doing that. Ralph maybe he's done great with his 401k. I don't know, but it's not, he doesn't have that background and expertise in that area. Put him on the ADA board. God, he'd be great on the ADA board. He's a fiscal conservative. He'd be great at evaluating whether we're getting the bang for our money in terms of investing in Alaska business. He understands Alaska businesses. He understands where that money would actually do some good and where we're just wasting it. It would be great. It would be great to have him on the ADA board, but he's just being wasted on the Permanent Fund Corporation. And it's just so disappointing when we have one of these opportunities come up to put somebody on the board that understands this stuff. We just waste it. This administration has just wasted it.
We got about 3 minutes here, Brad. So what do you see coming into the end of the year here? Obviously, the governor's budget is going to be a big deal. We're 2 weeks away from that. That'll be our final. I'm sure that'll be our final weekly top three. But what do you think here? What do you think is we're going to be looking at? What are you going to be watching?
It's just going to be a particularly challenging legislature next year. I mean, you're going to have the potential that oil prices drop away from you. The floor drops away on revenues. You're going to have a lot of pressure. I mean, that's what the whole K through 12 education task force is sitting there, right? I mean, they're to bring a lot more pressure to increase spending on K through 12. Now you're going to have all this LNG, the line stuff showing up saying, oh, we need this guarantee and that guarantee and that guarantee and that guarantee and this agreement. And, those all have revenue implications. Some of them have spending implications. And so the legislature is going to be hitting all of those. You got defined benefits that are sitting out there. Everybody thinks that, this is the time to push for defined benefits. You're just going to have a lot of issues hitting them in a very uncertain revenue, with a very uncertain revenue picture. And even if oil prices firm up through the rest of FY26, we don't know where they're going to go in FY27. I mean, EIA is seeing some serious issues out there with where oil prices go. Basically, it's that OPEC wants to regain market share, and OPEC's willing to take a reduction in price in order to regain market share. And EIA is seeing some very serious issues out there in FY27. So it's just going to be a very difficult legislature. The governor's budget will start that. I hope the governor makes some sort of revenue proposal, because we desperately need that in order to replace PFD cuts. But it's just going to be a very difficult legislature in the next session.
Any talk of revenue is almost a death knell at this point. I mean, we've had, Bernadette has said she's vehemently opposed to new taxes. Shelley said that. Everything else. And again, it's not that we want taxes. It's not that I want taxes, but there's got to be a discussion about where the money comes from. And you've got to start, so either you have to cut $2 billion out of the budget, or you have to find some other way to make it work. But there has to be some kind of downward pressure with some kind of spending cap of some kind. I mean, this has all got to happen, but nobody's willing to take that first step.
Yeah.
Well,
and
let me say this. Ben Carpenter tried to take the first step and immediately got butchered on the field.
Yeah.
So everybody else is like, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, the thing we need to keep in mind when we talk about revenues, and the reason I'm an advocate of the governor proposing revenues, because we already have taxes. PFD cuts are taxes. They're the most regressive tax ever proposed. We already have taxes hitting middle and lower income Alaska families a lot harder than a flat tax or a hugely broad-based sales tax, ultra broad-based sales tax. Hitting Alaska, PFD cuts are hitting middle and lower income. And by middle, I mean the full middle 60%, upper middle, and lower middle, hitting the middle 60% harder than any other form of alternative tax would. So I'm not advocating, and I've never advocated increased revenues. I'm advocating revenue design to replace the regressive taxes we have currently with a much broader base, much lower impact on the overall economy, much lower impact approach out there. And so that's why when some say, well, the governor may be proposing that would be a good thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for us, Brad. Go put your fire out. We'll see you. We'll see you later, my friend. Thank you for coming on board.
Michael, thanks for having me. Well, that's a wrap for another week's edition of the weekly top 3 from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you again for joining us. Remember that you can find past episodes on our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, and keep track of us during the week on Facebook and Twitter. This has been Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We look forward to you joining us again next week on the weekly top 3.